Greetings and welcome to the Quantum Ogre Cast, the topical TTRPG podcast you were destined to encounter no matter what choices you made. I have a very special guest with me today, Gavin Norman of Necrotic Gnome.
Hello.
How you doing?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, good. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. This is an exciting time this week, actually. I'm sure you guys have heard this, but it is the week of Ennies voting, and you have an awesome game that is part of the voting. Do you want to talk about it for a minute?
Yeah, so Dolmenwood is my kind of old school D&D based fairy tale game, which took 10-ish years to develop of my life. And amazingly, it's been nominated for 6 Ennies this year. So among them are best setting, which is like the ultimate one for me, and game of product of the year. Yeah, so it's really amazing to have these nominations. Like, I think the Ennies winning is awesome, but for me, I think being nominated is the best bit. That, like, you've you've reached that kind of stage, and then it just depends how many people vote for your thing in the end. But yeah, great thanks to the judges for that recognition. Yeah, if you're a fan, get out there and vote, because Necrotic Gnome is a small indie company, and we're up against some big games, so every vote helps to get kind of recognition our way, which is like amazing for small companies.
Well, and can I just say, personally, I think a very well-deserved nomination. Of all the games on my shelf, Dolmenwood has to be one of the, I think, best written and best looking books I now own. From the setting book to the game, the player's guide itself. I'm a big fan of your work, your design style. I think it all is very like clean and well laid out. So you get my vote.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're going to get into a lot of subjects today on the show. We're going to talk a bit about like digging into your background with Dolmenwood, some of the things that inspired you, like folklore and things like that. And then we're just really going to dig into the setting a bit and talk about, what makes Dolmenwood special and different from OSE even. But
Right,
yeah,
cool.
let's do a fun question before we go to our jingle here. But
Okay.
I always like to do like an icebreaker question. So, what do you do when you are not writing role-playing games? Do you have hobbies outside of this?
Yeah, I guess music is probably my other main kind of passion, apart
Cool.
from fantasy and sci-fi. Yeah, I mean, I used to make music, electronic music. I haven't done that for a long time since I, got so deeply into being a RPG creator. I haven't had time for a second creative hobby. Consuming music is a big thing for me. I love ambient music. I love vinyl. I love 70s jazz rock, or jazz fusion as it's sometimes known. Shoegaze, lots and lots of different stuff. Anything that's quite too very weird, I guess I like.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, I actually even I started another channel just for music and stuff called Elder Goblin
nice.
Bard. So I used to play a lot more than I do now that we had a kid, but I definitely miss making music. So yeah, awesome. That's fun little factoid for you guys at home that Gavin Norman is a real I almost said vinyl head, but that's not the term. But
My
yeah,
head is
anyways.
vinyl.
Head made of vinyl and full of fairies and in dark fantasy. So, all right, well, we're gonna do this quick. I'm the master of transitions, as you can tell. We're gonna do this quick jingle that I wrote, and then we'll be right back with more Dolmenwood. So, stick around. Okay, well, here's something I'm sure you don't get asked all the time. Are there any new games that you've been enjoying, or is it all Dolmenwood all the time?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, I'm so busy with my own stuff. Recently it's been all OSE all the time, actually, because we just had the OSE month and the Demonic Grimoire crowdfunding.
Oh yeah.
So that's actually been what we've been working on most over the last year. That plus running my own campaign, which is an OSE game I'm running at the moment, plus family, having a kid, etc. I don't get that much time to really like check out much stuff that other people are doing.
I figured
wish
as
I
much.
did.
I had to ask. That's always my like.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
like if you had the time, what's the game that you would reach for on your shelf?
Yeah, I mean, one game I've heard a lot about and sounds really interesting is Mythic Bastion Land, by Chris McDowell. I've just seen sort of peripheral stuff around it, a few reviews and stuff like that. I've not actually like dived into it myself, but that sounds really cool. That would be one I would look into if I had more time.
It's a really cool game. Just the
Right.
art alone is, and like
Yeah.
the tone of it. It's got that Arthurian legend,
Right.
Elden Ring kind of thing going on.
Yeah. Who's the artist? It was all done by one artist, right? If I remember.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but just amazing work. The
Yeah.
covers when you open the inside shows like every piece of art in the book. It's really cool.
Oh wow, awesome, cool
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, it's really neat. Yeah, it gives that book just has such a distinct tone to it that I think
Right.
few RPGs really capture.
Right.
But speaking of tone, that might be a nice segue into talking a little bit about some Dolmenwood.
Yes.
You worked on this book for what, 10 years? Is that right?
Yeah, I think in the end over 10 years, 10, 12 years, maybe something like that, if you count from the very initial like inklings to it's actually finished like out in the world. Yeah.
That is an endeavor.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it obviously wasn't planned to take that long. We had a plan initially of doing like a 3-book set, as it ended up, a player's book, a book about the like hex crawl, and a book of monsters. But I guess when I started writing it, just the kind of amount of detail I was putting into each element of the game, when you extrapolate that out to finishing the thing, that's what made it take 10 years.
Yeah.
That like we had a map with like 200 hexes drawn out on it, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, I guess we could have like a sentence or two per hex, and then started writing the first couple, and a lot more than one or two sentences came out, like a page or more. So then that set the precedent for like, okay, so each hex has got to be a full page in the book, and every aspect of the game like that. There was a seed. When it came to elaborating the seed to write that thing up, a lot more content came out than was necessarily originally intended, and
scope
the whole
creep,
basically.
Yeah, we call that scope creep, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's can I just say, it's such a gorgeous book, and like every time I look through it, I like selfishly don't want to learn anymore, because I want to be a player in that world and
right
like experience it, go in blind. But it's just
Yeah.
so cool. I love the lore. It's just fascinating stuff. So
Great, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have to ask then, how deep did you dive into folklore when you were writing Dolmenwood? Because there's a lot of like folk,
Yeah.
influence there.
Yeah, actually not very deep, to be honest. It's I don't know. Some people are the like research types and will like, read tons and tons and dig really deep into stuff. I'm somehow not like, I don't know. Actually, yeah, interesting. When it comes to old school D&D books, I am like, I'm very often like, I'll have a little sort of rules topic in my mind or something, and I'll be like, okay, I'll grab the first edition DMG, and I'll grab the like BX and the second edition, and maybe third edition has something to say on this, and I'm like cross-referencing all these different versions of the game. So in that world, I am very like research oriented. But for the kind of folkloric and fairy tale stuff in Dolmenwood, it was more. I would say it was more a kind of osmosis, like just from stuff I'd read over the years, over my whole life, like films I'd seen, whatever, TV series. Growing up in the UK, obviously, where there's a lot of like, Dolmenwood stuff, old forests and standing stones and like barrow mounds and old churches and ruins and all this kind of stuff. So like, I feel like just my whole life, just sort of that sort of stuff osmosed into me and then just came out as Dolmenwood.
That's awesome. That, to me, that makes it even more impressive that you didn't spin this off of a bunch of like already established folklore, but because there's so much there. Like it's such a rich world, and between all the factions and the Florentine Church and there's, like you said, every hex is full of either information or things to dig into or both.
Right.
It's just
there was a lot of we tried to add a lot of kind of connections between things as well. So like not necessarily every hex, but like a lot of the NPCs in the book, they'll have at least one connection to another NPC elsewhere or to a kind of some kind of adventure hook or stuff like that. And likewise in the hexes, there'll be stuff that like connects between different hexes. So the idea being that like, players can explore where they want and they'll always find something, and then that thing will usually lead on to something else. And so you have this natural like sandbox evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, not long ago, I had James and Ben who did Land of Eam.
Oh, right, cool.
I talked to them, and one of the things I really love about that book, The Mucklands, is that sort of like connectivity. Some of the quests even say like on your way out kind of things, like on your way to this hex, and I love to see that in Dolmenwood as well. It really is a tool, I feel, for the game master to be able to say like, hey, even if you're only hanging out in this section, here's some of the ways this is connected to the other hexes or factions or characters.
Yeah.
So
it would be really interesting to see some kind of like graphical map somehow of like where these connections are. I mean, it would have to be like a kind of online graphical kind of thing. I think if you tried to make that in a book and just print it, it would just be a mess. But like,
yeah, if you could like
zoom into and see the like threads and things.
Oh, that would be an incredible tool, just to be able to like click a hex and see all the connective lines. Yeah.
Right.
Wow, that would like evolve Dolmenwood even further than it already is.
I guess actually, in a way, when there are VTT versions of Dolmenwood, which are coming soon, by the way, that will have that in effect, in that, like, in a VTT, obviously you've got a like description. You can click on the NPC and their window pops up, and then you can click on whatever's mentioned in theirs and it pops up. So I guess it will kind of be a bit like that, but it won't all be visually represented in one place.
Well, even the book of maps already has so much in it that like points you in the right directions.
Right.
Or there's even a big hex map at the very back that has like all the quests or like locations kind of highlighted, for lack of a better term. Just really great.
Yeah, that was a fun book to create, actually. That, like, I'd always had this idea, when I noticed how sort of complex and deep Dolmenwood was becoming, I always had this idea like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to have a book of maps that kind of pulls this all together sort of visually. Like a good example, a simple example, is the foraging, like fungi and herbs. Like there's lots of weird, like, there's big lists of kind of mundane stuff, but then there's big lists of like special magical fungi and herbs, and many of them are just located in one particular hex, so you have to kind of quest to find them. And in the book of maps, then it has a map of like where all these special like fungi and herbs can be found in Dolmenwood. So as a kind of reference for the referee, I think that's like super useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a particular like slice of gaming that I really enjoy, is that like the sort of like go off and collect all the pieces and craft something. And I don't know, that harkens back to so many video games and things like that I grew up with. Were just huge inspirations to the style of games that I enjoy playing. So
Yeah, I also really love that kind of almost a sort of naturalistic aspect of the game, you know, like the kind of where are you camping and who, you know, who's building the fire and what
Yeah.
kind of plants are around you and stuff like that. Like I think in a game session you don't always have time to get down to that sort of level of detail. But I think when you have the chance, I really enjoy that personally. I also really enjoy just like taverns and stuff like that, you know, like
Oh
um,
yeah.
just players hanging out in taverns, talking to weird local NPCs and getting up to antics.
Yeah, yeah. As a big Tolkien fan, that's like
Right.
I
Mm.
60, 70% of his book is like or books are like traveling,
Right.
and
Yeah, yeah,
describing the
exactly. Mm.
scenery and
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and personally I'm almost like disappointed that some of that is lost when you get to the grander scale in some games. Like, if you have your
Right.
super heroic games, you kind of hand wave certain stuff. You might
Yeah.
not spend a lot of time digging into the
Yeah.
taverns and the
Mm.
NPCs in that town and things.
Yeah.
But that's a style of play I really appreciate. So I love
Mm.
seeing it being like a really big part of the Dolmenwood campaign
Right.
book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess you see that reflected in the all the lists of like different meals you can buy in taverns and the different drinks and pipe leaf and stuff like that. That it's like, you know, for players who are into that, it's not like obligatory you have to do that stuff, but it's there to kind of use for groups who love that kind of flavor.
Yeah.
That all that stuff, I love creating that as well. All these kind of weird pipe leaves and stuff like that. That's really fun.
I mean, why else do we play these games but to dig into a world and like really, you
Right.
know, find like you said, like the specific foods and the pipe weeds and like
Uh, yeah,
that's all the kind of juicy bits that I enjoy in like reading. So seeing
yeah,
that
yeah.
in a game is always
Right.
exciting to me. So
Uh,
so earlier you mentioned kind of like researching, doing some deep dives into like older editions of D&D and stuff.
mm,
Um, well, obviously OSE being a redefining of BX, and then
mm,
Dolmenwood being its sort of permutation of that. I
right.
so something I think this is probably the people in the comments are going to come at me for saying this because it's sort of bombastic to say, but to me, I feel like Dolmenwood is this sort of spiritual successor to even like BX. It's got this mystery and like
Mm,
wonder to it that every time I open the book, I'm like, I don't know, it transports me back to this feeling I had
yeah,
at the beginning of the hobby, if that makes
right.
sense, when everything was fresh and new and exciting. It's
Yeah.
it's like it's like to me, you took something from like the 70s and the 80s and like injected it into the book, and you
Mm,
can really feel that.
right.
Um,
I
like
think that that was kind of intentional, actually. I would say that, like, you know, a game like OSE, it's got your goblins and your orcs and your dragons and your mind flayers and all this really cool stuff. But it's like anyone who's been playing D&D for a while, it's stuff you've heard of before and you're familiar with it. You know, even if you've never had a battle with a mind flayer, for example. I don't think I ever have personally, in in real life or in a D&D game. You know what one is and you know what the deal is,
right.
right? If you encounter one and the DM is like, oh, it's a guy with a sort of octopus face and robes, you're like, okay, mind flayer. Um,
Yeah.
beware of psionics.
Put
But
on your
so the
tinfoil
kind
hat.
of yeah, right. Part of the intent with Dolmenwood was to roll that back a bit, and by replacing a lot of the standard D&D monsters with like folkloric inspired versions of them, rather than like the iconic D&D version, and then just adding a load of new stuff, new magic items, new monsters. Um, and the same for the player options, the new kind of like character kindreds rather than your standard elves, dwarves, halflings, just to re-inject that feeling of like novelty and wonder. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was definitely kind of part of the design intent of the game.
Yeah, I think personally, to me, it really shines through throughout all the books. Like I said, it's giving me that childlike wonder again, and again, selfishly, I don't want to explore too deep. I almost like don't want to run it.
Right.
I want to enjoy it for a bit before
Mm.
I become the Dolmenwood game master,
Right, right.
But here's a question to follow up on that.
Mm.
Have you noticed any fan favorites arising from like either things like Kindred or even some of the factions and lore, or maybe even an adventure that you've written for Dolmenwood?
I would say a fan favorite Kindred I see people talk about a lot is the Grimalkin, actually, which is the little like fairy tale cat people.
Oh yeah,
I think this is an interesting thing in Dolmenwood, actually, that like as we've said, there is this sense of mystery, and some groups wish to keep fairies mysterious in the game.
sure, yeah.
So you see a lot of people will run campaigns that are like mortal kindreds only or humans only even. And the referee is saying like, okay, if you meet a fairy in the game, then you get to learn about them, but you can't just be one from the beginning. I think the most common exception to that I see is Grimalkins. Like a lot of people seem to love, I guess people just love cats. I love cats. So it's like people will see that in the book and want to be a cat person. And I think I remember reading somewhere about a whole party of Grimalkins, maybe like all the players wanted to be a cat, so they were like, okay, let's do a Grimalkin campaign.
I totally get that desire though that you're talking about. I kind of do a similar thing with I'm running a Shadow Dark game for a club, and I have everyone start off just as like the core uh, ancestries and classes,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
as you either meet them or die a bunch from them,
Right.
you can gain more and more of those,
Right. Yeah.
unlock them,
More
if you will.
options. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think that's quite a common approach, isn't it? Yeah. I've
but
never tried it myself, actually, but
it's worth a shot. It's very like gamification of it, but
right.
they're role
Yeah.
playing games. That's part of
Mm.
the hobby. So, but yeah, I really been enjoying the Mossling. I get to play
Mm. Cool.
in a game with a guy from the Discord and some friends on YouTube, and I got to play a little Mossling, and he was like my forest dwarf, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, maybe that's not the correct lore accurate way to picture them, but that's kind
Yeah.
of how I ran him.
They I mean they originated in Wormskin issue 1 as moss dwarfs, they were called. Eventually I decided to change the name because I didn't feel it was a very accurate name. Like, okay, they're dwarfs as in they're little guys, but like not many, they don't share many of the other sort of Tolkien dwarf traits that people are used to. So I decided to change them just to mosslings. That was actually the kind of origin of that name.
Yeah, it's very fitting to the sort of fairy tale kind of vibes that
Right.
permeate all of Dolmenwood. So,
Yeah.
since you mentioned Wormskin,
Right.
I now have to ask. There's a Wormskin Volume 2 coming. I hear.
Yes. Right.
Do you want?
So for anyone who's not familiar, briefly, Wormskin was the zine that kind of kicked off Dolmenwood. We released 8 issues from, what was it, like 2013-ish, something like that. Soon became clear that there was way too much material to fit into a zine series, and then I started like seriously writing the kind of full books. But now Dolmenwood is out as a complete thing. We're relaunching Wormskin Volume 2 as a kind of support zine. So you'll get like issue 1 is nearly finished, actually. So there's like a short adventure in it. There's some fiction. There's some new spells. It's kind of miscellaneous kind of stuff that you can add to your Dolmenwood game. There's some like lore kind of stuff around some of the festivals, like what happens on some of the saint feast days, stuff like that. So yeah, we just sent out the short adventure for playtesting this week or last week. So, yeah. Oh, new monsters. Yeah, just kind of like fun stuff you can add to your games. So it's not like expanding the setting in the sense of like, here's a new hex region to the west or whatever. But just delving more into the kind of depth of the setting as it is and adding new material that way.
It's probably closer to like a carcass crawler if you're
Exactly.
familiar with
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Um, well, if you're listening, you're familiar with those. Closer to that than say like a curse scroll, which is almost like a mini setting or something.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing in Dolmenwood is I don't envisage adding loads more player options. Like in Carcass Crawl, there's been a lot of new classes and races and stuff like that. Probably every issue, in fact, introduces some new player option. But that's because OSE is more of a like toolkit, sort of fantasy toolkit, so you can build your own setting by picking different options.
Yeah.
Whereas Dolmenwood, I think, there's already a strong kind of like set of archetypes that are presented for players. So I don't envisage just spamming out lots of new, character options for players in Wormskin.
Yeah, you kind of risk. Well, in my experience, I've seen games that do that, and it almost like it starts to pull more and more away from the central themes of the game, or
Yeah,
like
yeah,
even the feel. You get that sort
right,
of bloat,
yeah,
and it starts feeling less and less like, say, Dolmenwood, and more just like
mm,
generic fantasy or something.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, the wormskins are actually how I first heard about you,
Ah, cool. Okay,
long
nice.
ago from Questing Beast channel,
Mhm.
and then
Right.
I through that discovered OSE, and
Mm.
that was sort of OSE, Cairn, and Knave were my introductions to old school
Oh,
play.
nice. Right. That's
Because
pretty cool.
I didn't grow up playing games until probably 2015, I'm gonna say. Um,
Right.
so I came late to the old school scene.
Mm,
I kind of worked my way backwards from
right.
like Pathfinder 5th edition, and then finally discovered like old school essentials. And that was the moment I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!" Because there are things I really appreciate about like some of the older editions of the game. But for me, starting out more modern and working my way backwards, I found it difficult to parse a lot of the language and like some of the
Mm,
texts
yeah.
in older editions. So when I
Mm,
found old school essentials, it was like a light bulb clicked, and I was like, oh, cool, this is really clean, really well laid out. All the information is in like laid out in a thoughtful way.
right.
And then yeah, I started to find your company, Necrotic Gnome, and I picked up some of the adventures here
Oh,
that
nice. Cool. Yeah.
I
Great.
really enjoy, and also like Necrotic Gnome was a game changer for me in adventure layout and design as well. Like
Mm,
seeing how your adventures were put together, from an information standpoint,
right.
how
Yeah.
they're laid out, and everything from
Uh,
like the little mini maps and stuff. So it's just to me, it's been like a journey of like discovering all this stuff that really clicked with me
right.
in a
Cool.
way that a
Fantastic.
lot of the modern games didn't.
Mm.
So
That's actually really cool to hear that, like, because I often hear from OSE fans who were BX or AD&D players back in the 70s and 80s, and they love OSE because it clearly presents those rules that they're familiar with, right? That's one obvious kind of like use case for the game. But it's cool to hear that it also works the other way. Someone coming from newer D&D can take OSE and understand it without the whole history of having played BX back in the day. I mean, that's the
yeah.
aim, obviously, but it's cool to hear that that worked for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm still working my way back through some of the older. I'm looking over at my AD&D books that I
Mm,
recently picked up, and there's like some really cool ideas and stuff in there. But at the same time, sometimes I just want a reference material where I can
yeah,
just like
yeah,
look
uh,
through and be like, okay, I need to know what a fighter gets, at what level
yeah,
and how much XP they get versus someone else or whatever.
yeah. Without having to
Um,
consult like 3 different books or something. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was just a unique maybe perspective into like arriving in the OSR versus you know someone like you're saying who started there and kind of worked
yeah,
their way back again. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, it's been a fun journey exploring, and I have you to blame for that.
Good. I'm glad.
So okay, here's a fun question. You mentioned like you know the worm skins. We talked about how you're expanding on Dolmenwood. Even now, you're working forward. After spending over 10 years in Dolmenwood, how do you stay inspired and not just lead yourself to more burnout?
By having multiple projects going on at once. I think if I'd finished Dolmenwood and I didn't have OSE to jump back into, I probably would have risked burnout at that point, because it was, the last year of working on Dolmenwood, doing the Kickstarter and everything was so intense. When that all wrapped up and I was like sending off the print files, okay, it's done. Here you go. Hand it over to someone else now. I was like, I really need a break from Dolmenwood. So, but the cool thing is, I had OSE and we jumped right into the demonic grimoires and other adventures and stuff like that, which has been amazing kind of palate cleanser. So I think that's the key for me. Like even on a kind of day-to-day basis, I'll usually have I don't know, 4 or 5 different projects going on. Like I'll be kind of writing something and editing or reviewing something else and doing layout or something else, and I'll just jump between them, just to kind of keep my mind fresh as I'm working.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who's I consider myself like a writer / artist, and I'm working on a game myself. It doesn't matter how much you love your game, if you get so close to it and spend enough time in it, you hit a wall where you're like, all right, I'm ready to do something else. Have a tonal shift or whatever it is. So
totally. I think another thing with Dolmenwood is that, as I said before, it was it felt kind of, developing Dolmenwood felt like potentially endless in a way. Like there was a point at which I decided, okay, that's enough. That's a finished game now. But there's loads of other ideas, absolutely tons of other ideas that aren't in the game currently, but that I can now tap into for future projects. So there's a lot of ideas for future stuff to come.
Do you ever? This is just kind of a personal question for me. As someone who's we can all fall into that, whether it's world builder syndrome or game design, over tweaking things. Do you create sort of constraints or limits for yourself so that you don't overdo it and just infinitely work on a project and refine?
In terms of the kind of volume of writing, definitely. OSE and Dolman would both have this very Questing Beast calls it the control panel layout. So everything you need for a topic is on one page or 2 facing pages. So I use that very strongly as a restraint on not going on and on and on about a topic. I'll write something and then put it in the layout, and it's okay, need to cut a little bit here, add a little bit here, but now it fits. That's it. That's the end of that topic. No more. In terms of time usage, not so much actually. That would be kind of cool. I wonder if there's an equivalent to the the control panel time usage somehow.
Yeah, I'm always just curious of designers' processes, because I feel like we all attack things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I found personally, as soon as I put pen to paper to start designing something, I can spiral outward, and then it becomes so far from the original thought that I really have to define for myself what are my core principles in designing a game or a setting or whatever it is. So it's just a curious thought there of if you had a lot of a methodology or a constraint that you set on yourself when you start out.
No, not consciously, at least.
Yeah.
I'll think about that though. It may be that I have kind of unconscious kind of patterns of doing things a certain way, but
and sometimes you just get so into your process that it's just second nature, and so you're probably well past that point by now. But yeah, do you want to talk about your future, the future of Dolmenwood beyond Brackenwold? Do you have plans already for other areas?
Expanding the world itself. It's kind of I don't know. I have mixed kind of feelings on that topic, I guess, in a way, because one of the design intents of Dolmenwood was that it is this quite limited area, and if you read the books, within the books, there's hardly any references to anything outside Dolmenwood. I think there's 2 or 3 references. I think at one point, it mentions there's a kingdom that the Duchy of Breckenmore is part of a larger kingdom. Doesn't say anything about that kingdom. You know, just a couple of little references like that. But the intention there was that you can play a campaign fully within Dolmenwood for a long time. But if you've got another campaign world that you want to put Dolmenwood into, you can just kind of slot it in, and you don't have to like do a load of stitching of these bits around the edges. In a sense, you know, expanding Dolmenwood like geographically would kind of go against that original design intention.
Yeah.
Though it would be a lot of fun. I would love to. I definitely have had ideas about what lies to the south and so on.
Well, in one way, if you think about like what we were saying earlier about that sense of mystery and wonder, you've almost done yourself a favor if you do expand, because you haven't referenced a bunch of stuff that the players will be like,
Yeah,
oh, well, I
yeah,
know about all this, you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think if we did an expansion, like I've imagined possible expansions to the north and south. Say, like to the north, there's the Table Downs, and there's a little hint about this character called the Flayed Queen, some kind of undead overlord, which is like coming out of sleep or rest or whatever, and like starting to make kind of undead evil burblings in the north there. So that would be a cool expansion. You know, it could be, I don't know if it would be like 200 more hexes to the north in the same way as the campaign book, but like
another 10 years.
That could be some kind of right. Yeah, that could be a kind of campaign expansion. To the south, I've imagined like I would love to do a sort of nautical area actually, because that's one thing that the Dolmenwood map doesn't have at all. You know, it has lakes, but there's no sea or ocean. So I've kind of vaguely imagined that, like, if you go, you know, 100 miles to the south, maybe you meet a kind of sea with islands and stuff, and kind of, yeah, just imagining kind of nautical folklore, fairy tale kind of vibe.
That's cool. Well,
you know, different kinds of mer creatures and stuff like that. I think that could be a pretty nice vein to tap into for Dolmenwood.
I would personally be pretty stoked about that.
Yeah. Very hypothetical.
You don't know this, but in my Shadow Dark world right now, we're doing like a island crawl. And
nice.
I just decided I'm going to pull from all the materials I already own. I've just been plugging a bunch of adventures on different islands. Right. And in my world, it's like Dolmenwood is off to the east, and the western reaches are off to the west, obviously, stuff like that. And I just Land of Eames to the north.
Yeah.
None of it matches tonally, but if you go, you know, you pass through some barrier or whatever, and you're in a different world. But
yeah, that's really fun. Like, yeah, just stitching stuff together.
I'm having a lot of fun with it, so I would be stoked to have more island material, especially coming from you and your team. So
the most obvious thing we would like to expand, though, is the world of fairy. So that probably is the biggest like ellipsis in Dolmenwood. Like, you know, there's these doors into fairy, and there's however many is there, like 10, 12 something different kind of fairy realms are described, but they only get a couple of paragraphs each. It's not like, you know, it's not like full adventuring material. So that would be another obvious expansion, like to do a book about, you know, more detail of what happens if you go through these fairy doors and what kind of adventures you can have there. That would be another really fun thing.
Yeah, also very easy narratively to connect, obviously, because there's so much Fey influence in Dolmenwood.
So we've kind of chatted about that a little bit in the team, and like we would probably not do it as like a hex crawl, but more maybe some kind of like generative depth crawly type structure. So like, you know, to bring out this like shifting, like kind of befuddling nature of fairy. So like when you're in Dolmenwood, you can make a map and you can follow the roads and follow the maps, and north is north and the sun sets, and you know, in fairy none of that necessarily is the case. You know, one time you enter and you're right in front of this great kind of palace. The next time you enter and you're in a ravine in a desert or whatever, you know, like, and you can find your way through to these different places, but they're not necessarily spatially always in the same relationship. So maybe something like that. That would be our kind of initial concept to work from anyway, if we started doing this fairy book.
Well, I'm all about it. I look forward to it. That's a perfect addition to Dolmenwood if it ever comes to be. So earlier we were talking about doing research into the old editions and like you really deep diving into those. Would you say that there were any, or even with OSE, would you say that there were any particular changes to Dolmenwood that you really just felt fit the game and the setting better, that were just maybe some decision points that you had to kind of make that changed everything, or were they all pretty on like similar?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of rules changes from OSE to Dolmenwood. I would say in terms of the kind of mechanics of the game, most of the rules tweaks were made for a kind of streamlining kind of reason. So like, in OSE there's, or well, in old school D&D there's descending armor class or THAC0.
Yeah.
In OSE you have that and ascending armor class, so you can choose either. In Dolmenwood, I just wanted it to be streamlined, so I just went with ascending armor class, which is, I think, is slightly simpler, and probably overall more people are familiar with it nowadays. So it seemed the kind of slightly easier route.
Most of the modern games have gone that route, so it makes sense to follow suit, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Similarly, like there's a kind of simple skill system in Dolmenwood, which is based on the kind of 2 in 6 or 1 in 6 skills you have in old school D&D. Like, human has a 1 in 6 chance of finding a secret door. Elves have a 2 in 6 chance, whatever. Or like thieves have a X in 6 chance of hearing noises, which increases as they go up. So I just kind of took that sort of simple system and expanded that as like, this is how skills work in Dolmenwood. So not all the classes have skills like that, but like, the classes that do have skills, it's unified on that one system. So you don't have kind of percentages flying around in different classes.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense to kind of like, and this is where I think maybe I differ from some of the hardcore old school folks, but it makes sense to sort of unify that and streamline it for a system that's kind of forking and becoming its own thing. So
right. Yeah. One interesting decision that I made along the way that is kind of goes against the BX or OSE Foundation is the choice to have kindred and class, that you choose one of each as the kind of core way of creating characters. So in like BX D&D, you have like race classes, so you will choose to be an elf or a dwarf, say.
Right.
Whereas in Dolmenwood, I originally had it working like that, but then I was writing up an NPC in one of the hexes, which was like a Grimalkin kind of minstrel kind of character, and I was like, what is she then? So she's not a standard Grimalkin, but this is a really cool archetype. So then I was like, oh, okay, she's a Grimalkin bard, obvious. So that's what kind of pushed me in that direction. So that is something that came from the world and kind of affected a sort of mechanical choice in that way.
Yeah, I'm personally a fan of more customization. I grew up in Pathfinder, so there's definitely no lack of customization there. But that makes me think of one more sort of interesting question to close out with here, as we wrap up. But what are some, if any, what are some traditions in our hobby that you think maybe could or should be let go of or even forgotten? And maybe that's something that we can dig into for a minute, but I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on that.
My sort of initial instinct was to say like wall of text writing in rule books and adventures, but I think some people like that. For me, I don't get on with it at all. Like, I need nicely broken down, like bullet points and like, you know, short paragraphs, short sentences, especially, you know, in the heat of running a game. Like, I need to
Yeah.
be able to very quickly read, like, what's in the next room, you know, what is this monster doing? I don't want to have to read half a page of text. But
Yeah.
other people, from what one hears, like the wall of text, or like a more like verbose kind of description of things. So yeah, I don't know. I think it would be unfair to those people to entirely ditch that traditional way of writing.
Sure, yeah. I know I'm right there with you. I personally enjoy the more concise, like for the exact reason you said, you know, when you're firing on all pistons and you're using 110% brain power
Yeah,
and you have to look down and go, okay, what was the one bit of information I needed in this room?
right. Yeah,
You
how
know,
does this trap work or whatever?
but you know, I am glad that those other styles exist for the people who
Mm,
want that really
yeah,
rich, you
yeah,
know, like
yeah,
dig into it, let it saturate your brain, and then you know it's great, you know, for those
yeah.
folks. I'm
I
glad
think
it does
it's
exist, but
I think it reflects almost like different styles of learning, probably like neurologically speaking.
true, yeah,
It's not a topic I know a lot about, but I imagine it might kind of indicate that there's different ways of like humans absorbing information from a page, you know, written information.
absolutely, yeah. And you know, just like we said earlier about the your Necrotic Gnome adventure design, for me that was a light bulb moment where I just said, okay, I found something that I better understand how to process or learn
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a factor in whether or not I pick up and try to run an adventure or a game.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Same. Yeah. Totally.
and there's
If
probably
I
people
if I
on the
flip, if I flip open an adventure and I see a wall of text, like apologies to people who write in that style, but I'm just like, okay, that's not for me. Like,
yeah, and I always like to say on this channel, I did my time in the trenches. You know, I played Pathfinder, I played Fifth Edition, and I enjoyed my time there. But nowadays, you know, I'm a dad and full time job, so I appreciate when I can almost like run it while I'm reading it.
right.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so yeah. Well, cool. I won't take much more of your time, Gavin. I thank you so much for being here. This has been a blast. If you're listening, if you made it this far and you forgot about the Ennies voting, go vote. Dolmenwood is an amazing setting. It's an amazing game. Um, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Do you want to shout out anything else other than the Ennies before we go? Any
Yeah.
secret projects that we can get some juice on or
I mean,
something?
yeah. One cool thing I could mention is the OSE adventure that we've been working on for the last year or so, Beneath the Radiant Dome,
Mm.
which is written by myself. So this is a full-length adventure. So it'll be in one of those hardcovers like the ones you've got there. It's quite a big adventure actually. I think it's like 80 or so dungeon areas. So it's a lot bigger than some of the shorter adventures we've been working on. Um, and this is a really cool adventure. It's kind of has a sort of science fantasy kind of vibe to it. So
Oh,
you're in
cool.
this weird kind of like, but it's like magi tech. It's not like actual science technology. It's like arcane technology. So weird kind of laboratories and kind of automata and yeah, lots of weird stuff. So it's a really fun adventure. That's coming soon.
You're singing my song there, Gavin. That's
That's
exactly my kind of slice of
awesome.
pie right there.
Yeah.
So
So we
I
should
look
be sending that to print in the next couple of weeks. So,
awesome.
yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you again so much for being here. Thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate you guys. And as always, we will see you next time in the dungeon, no matter what choices you make.